Go asleep in your car. Maybe the cold will teach you about real success. My briefcase landed in the snowdrift with a muffled thump. My father, Thomas, stood in the doorway, his face crimson against the white chaos of a Denver blizzard. Behind him, my mother, Linda, didn't even glance up from her tablet. She was too occupied reviewing Pinterest boards, probably admiring the design projects my sister Melissa pretended she'd completed. I didn't plead. I didn't shed tears. I just wiped the snow off the leather case. Then I looked at him and smiled. It wasn't a warm smile. It was the smile of someone who just realized they hold all the cards. I turned and walked directly into the whiteout. Before I reveal exactly how I made them regret that evening, drop a comment and tell me where you're listening from and what time it is for you right now. I'd love to know who's part of our community. Most people in a blizzard search for refuge. I searched for connectivity. I drove my worn sedan past the budget motel, past the coffee shop, straight to the private hangar at Denver International Airport. I entered the keypad code, a sequence my parents believed was for a storage unit, and the heavy steel door slid open. Inside sat my mobile headquarters, a Bombardier Global 7500. I climbed the steps, brushed the snow off my jacket, and settled into the leather executive chair. The cabin was silent, filled with the scent of conditioned air and premium leather. I opened the laptop my father had just thrown into a snowdrift. The screen flickered to life. I checked the terminal running in the background. While Thomas was screaming at me about real success, my automated investment algorithm had executed 38 trades. Net profit for the last 90 minutes, $47,000. I didn't feel joy. Joy is an emotion. This was just mathematics. For 29 years, I had been the shadow in their household, the disappointment, the one who played on computers, while my sister Melissa was the celebrated interior designer. They looked at me, but they didn't perceive me. Psychologists call it the cognitive dissonance of the insecure. See, my parents had constructed their entire identity on a simple fabrication. Melissa was the achiever and I was the failure. That was the foundational pillar of their reality. If they acknowledged that I was successful, that the computer activities were actually sophisticated financial technology algorithms, their world would crumble. It would mean they were wrong. It would mean their massive financial and emotional investment in Melissa was wasted. To protect their egos, their brains literally rejected the evidence. They didn't ignore my success because it was invisible. They ignored it because acknowledging it would destroy them. They needed me to be small so they could feel significant. So I let them. I'd performed the role they assigned me, the struggling, unsuccessful daughter living in their converted garage. But every month for 6 years, I had established a shell company, Summit Consulting Group LLC. That company paid a retainer fee of $5,200 into my father's business account. They thought it was a fortunate contract from a former associate. It was me. I was the only reason they could maintain the mortgage on the house they just expelled me from. I was the only reason Melissa could lease her Mercedes. They were living on a subscription to my guilt, and they didn't even realize it. I looked at the bank transfer scheduled for tomorrow morning. I typed the command, payment suspension. I hit enter. The status indicator turned red. Transfer canceled. I leaned back in the chair. The silence in the hangar was substantial. Absolute. It felt like atmospheric pressure dropping before a tornado. They wanted me to comprehend the value of money. Fine. I closed the laptop. Education begins now. 3 weeks later, I was observing the sunrise over downtown from the penthouse of the Four Seasons Hotel. I wasn't using my legal name. The reservation was under a holding entity. To the staff, I was simply a reserved consultant who tipped generously and declined housekeeping. To the world, I was invisible, but to my family, I was suddenly a cyber criminal. My phone, which I'd left on silent for 21 days, was vibrating across the marble counter. It wasn't a call, it was an assault. I picked it up and scrolled through the messages. It read like a psychological case study in panic. It started 4 days after I departed. That was the day the Summit Consulting transfer typically hit my father's account. My mother texted, Natalie, did you tamper with the router before you left? The business accounts are malfunctioning. Answer me. Your father is attempting to pay contractors and the system is displaying insufficient funds. What did you do to the network? I took a sip of espresso. The network was fine. The subsidy was terminated. By day 9, the tone had shifted from irritation to accusation. My father wrote, "We know you compromised the accounts. It's the only logical explanation. Restore the funds or I'm contacting authorities. You think this is a joke? Melissa is distraught because her supplier payment is delayed and we can't help her because someone sabotaged our cash flow." I actually laughed at that one. A dry, brief sound. They genuinely believed I was hacking them. Their brains couldn't process the alternative. In their narrative, Thomas was a successful contractor, and I was the technology-incompetent disappointment. It was easier for them to believe I had suddenly become an expert hacker than to admit they had been living on my charity for over half a decade. And then there was the fabrication about Melissa. Supplier payment is delayed. I accessed the business registration database on my tablet. Melissa hadn't completed a design project in 8 months. There was no supplier payment coming. She was drowning in lease payments for a luxury vehicle she couldn't afford and credit card debt from fabricating her lifestyle on social media. She wasn't distraught because of a banking error. She was distraught because the bank of mom and dad had just been closed, and she didn't understand why. I didn't respond. I didn't defend myself. I simply observed the desperation transform into public theater. My mother, realizing private threats weren't working, had taken her performance to the stage. I opened Facebook. There it was, posted 3 hours ago, a photograph of Linda and Melissa at a charity gala from last year, looking radiant and filtered. The caption read, "It's devastating when you nurture a child, provide them everything, and they turn around and betray you. Snakes eventually show their true nature. Praying for my misguided daughter to find integrity and gratitude." 82 likes, 34 comments from her social circle saying things like, "Stay strong, Linda," and "Some children just lack appreciation." It was a masterclass in narrative manipulation. She was publicly condemning me for betraying the hand that feeds, while privately desperately texting me because my hand had stopped feeding them. The hypocrisy wasn't surprising, it was systematic. I put the phone down. Most people would have felt the urge to comment, to post the evidence, to scream the truth into the comments section and incinerate the entire facade, but I didn't. Anger is a volatile asset. If you expend it in small increments, it loses its value. You have to accumulate it, compound it, and invest it where it yields the maximum return. A social media comment war is a low-yield investment. I had something much more strategic in mind. I opened my laptop and composed an email to the only person in my family who wasn't delusional, my cousin Marcus. He was a forensic financial analyst in Portland, the boring cousin that Aunt Linda mocked because he didn't drive a Tesla. Subject: comprehensive audit request. Marcus, I need you to examine the records, not just the business. Everything. I'm acquiring the debt, but I need to understand exactly what I'm purchasing. Invoice me your standard rate plus 60% for expedited service. I hit send. They wanted to accuse me of hacking. Fine, I wouldn't hack them, I would audit them, and I would acquire everything. Forensic financial analysis is just an autopsy for capital. You dissect the ledger and discover what actually killed the patient. Marcus sat across from me in the suite living area. He looked uncomfortable in the luxury, clutching his worn briefcase like protection. He was the cousin Aunt Linda called the boring one because he worked for the Treasury Department for 6 years before going private. He didn't know about my wealth until 15 minutes ago. I'd slid a tablet across the coffee table displaying my portfolio. He choked on his coffee. "Natalie," he whispered, scrolling through the holdings. This is institutional capital. You're a whale." "I'm a ghost," I corrected, "and I need you to haunt my parents." I handed him the access credentials to the Summit Consulting servers, the shell company I used to channel money to them, but I also handed him something else, the authorization to examine the public records and credit histories associated with my father's LLC. I want to understand why, I said, pouring him sparkling water. I was sending them $62,400 annually tax-free. Dad's contractor pension is another $45,000. Melissa claims she's completing six-figure design projects. Why did the payment freeze cause a meltdown in 4 days? They should have reserves. Marcus adjusted his glasses. The shock was fading, replaced by the investigator's focus. This was his domain. "Give me 72 hours," he said. "You have 36. While Marcus dove into the digital financial trail, I went to work on the legal one. I opened a new file on my laptop. I didn't open it as Natalie, the rejected daughter. I opened it as the managing director of Alpine Peak Investments, the anonymous trust that had purchased the non-performing mortgage on my parents' house 8 months ago. The bank had been pleased to offload the risky debt. They didn't care who bought it. They just wanted the capital. My parents had received correspondence saying their mortgage had been sold to a new servicer. They probably discarded it without reading it, assuming it was just administrative paperwork. They didn't know that the new servicer was the daughter living in their converted garage. I'd bought the debt as insurance, a safety net to keep a roof over their heads if Dad's construction business collapsed again. Now it was leverage. I typed the header. Notice of default and acceleration demand. The cursor blinked. For years, I'd been terrified of my father's voice, the way it thundered when he was angry, the way he could make me feel insignificant just by his expression. But looking at the legal document, the fear evaporated. In the eyes of the law, he wasn't an intimidating patriarch. He was a distressed borrower, and I was the secured creditor. Relationships are complex. Contracts are absolute. I drafted the terms. They had missed the payment on the first of the month because I hadn't sent the money to cover it. According to the loan agreement, they were now in default. I added a clause demanding complete property inspection. That meant I had the legal right to enter the house to assess the asset. I printed the document. The printer hummed, a rhythmic, mechanical sound that felt more soothing than any melody. Marcus looked up from his laptop. His face was ashen. "Nat," his voice strained, "you need to see this." "What is it? Is Dad's business failing again?" "No," Marcus said. "It's worse. It's not just mismanagement, it's systematic." He turned his screen toward me. "I tracked the Summit payments. You thought they were going to the mortgage. They weren't. Your dad hasn't paid the principal on the house in 3 years. He's been paying interest only to keep the bank satisfied." "Then where did my money go?" I asked, my voice dropping to a dangerously low register. Marcus pointed to a series of transfers, to a marketing agency in LA, to a brand consulting firm, to a leasing company for a Mercedes. He looked at me, his eyes wide behind the lenses. "They were spending your money to fabricate Melissa's career. They were purchasing her fake design awards. They were paying for engagement farms to boost her Instagram posts. Nat, they weren't just broke. They were investing everything you gave them into a pyramid scheme called Melissa's Success." I looked at the numbers. It was a factory of deception powered by my labor. "Keep investigating," I said. "I want the definitive evidence." Marcus hesitated. "There's one more thing," he said, "a withdrawal from an account I didn't recognize. A custodial account. It had your name on it on the original documentation from Grandma." My blood went cold. Grandma's education fund. I hadn't touched it. I'd forgotten it existed. "How much?" $31,800, Marcus said, "withdrawn 4 weeks ago. Signature looks questionable." "And where did it go?" Marcus clicked a file. "That's the part that's going to send someone to prison. To a private settlement account," Marcus said, turning the screen so I could see the wire transfer details. "Beneficiary, the Chen Family Trust." I frowned. Who are the Chens? I didn't know either, Marcus said, pulling up a new document, so I cross-referenced Melissa's completed projects. The Chens hired her 8 months ago, a luxury home renovation in Cherry Creek. 3 weeks after completion, they threatened to sue, not just for a refund, they were going to the state licensing board to have Melissa's certification revoked for fraud. Fraud? She completed a renovation with active structural code violations, Marcus said, his voice shaking with the weight of what he was seeing. She knew about it. There was an inspection report from the city that she concealed. She buried it to complete the project and get her payment. She committed contractor fraud to maintain the appearance of being a top designer.
The picture snapped into focus like a high-resolution image. Melissa hadn't just failed. She had cheated. She had committed professional fraud to maintain the illusion of being a successful designer. And when she got caught, she didn't face the consequences. She went to Mommy. And Mommy didn't have the cash to bail her out because I had frozen the Summit account. So Linda did the only thing she could think of. She forged my signature on a dormant custodial account, money my grandmother left for my education, and used it to pay hush money to the Chens. They stole my inheritance to bribe a family into silence, all to protect Melissa's fabricated career. Marcus took off his glasses and rubbed his eyes. He looked sick. Nat, this is a felony. Identity theft, wire fraud, grand larceny. If you report this, your mother goes to federal prison. Melissa loses her license permanently. He looked at me, expecting the explosion. He expected me to scream, to cry, to throw the expensive sculpture on the mantel. That's what people do when they realize their own mother sacrificed them on the altar of their sibling's ego. But I didn't feel rage. I felt a strange, icy calm settling over me. It was the feeling of a complex equation finally balancing out to zero. I looked at the number on the screen. $31,800. In the corporate world, we have a term for this. It's called a severance package. If you want to terminate a contract early, you pay a penalty. You write a check to dissolve the obligation. It hurts to pay it, but once the check clears, you are legally free. You walk away. No more obligations. No more liability. For 29 years, I had been paying an emotional tax to be part of this family. I had paid with my self-worth. I had paid with my silence. I had paid with the secret monthly transfers. But this theft, this was the final invoice. It's the scapegoat tax, I said softly. Marcus looked up. What? The tax of the scapegoat, I said, staring at the forged signature on the screen. They took 32 grand. That's substantial money. But think about what I'm purchasing with it, Marcus. I stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the snow-covered Rockies. If I paid an attorney to remove them from my life, it would cost this much. If I paid a therapist to help me stop seeking their validation, it would cost this much. They just saved me the trouble. They processed the transaction themselves. I turned back to him. They didn't steal from me. They handed me a receipt that says I never owe them anything ever again. Not a phone call, not a holiday card, not a single moment of my time. So you're not going to contact the authorities? Marcus asked. No, I said. Police are for criminals. My parents aren't criminals. They're just bad investments. I picked up the leather portfolio containing the foreclosure notice and the audit report. I added the printout of the wire fraud to the stack. I'm not sending them to prison, Marcus. That's too easy. In prison, they get 3 meals a day, and they get to play the victim. They get to tell everyone how their cruel daughter put them there. I snapped the portfolio shut. The sound echoed like a gunshot in the quiet suite. I'm going to do something much more effective. I'm going to treat them exactly like they treated me, like a business transaction that has expired. I checked my watch. 6 p.m. Pack up the equipment, I said. I just sent them an invitation to dinner at the Capital Grille. I told them I have a proposal to resolve their cash flow problem. Marcus looked terrified. You're going to feed them? No, I said, heading for the door. I'm going to serve them. The Capital Grille is the kind of establishment where the menus don't display prices, and the atmosphere smells like aged oak and premium steak. It's where Denver's real power brokers dine. I arrived 15 minutes early. I ordered a sparkling water with lemon. I sat with my back to the wall, the leather portfolio resting on the table like a loaded weapon. They arrived 20 minutes late. It was a power move, or at least they thought it was. Thomas walked in first, chest inflated, wearing his business negotiation suit. Linda followed, scanning the room to see who was observing her entrance. And trailing behind them was Melissa. She was wearing an ivory cashmere coat that I knew she couldn't afford. As she sat down, I saw the white tag tucked discreetly inside the collar. She was planning to return it tomorrow. They slid into the booth. They didn't look frightened. They looked smug. They thought I was there to surrender. In their minds, I was the daughter who had thrown a tantrum, gotten cold, and realized I couldn't survive without them. They thought the proposal I mentioned was a plea for forgiveness. "Well," Thomas said, picking up the wine list without looking at me, "I see you've finally come to your senses." He signaled the sommelier. "Bottle of the 2016 Napa Cabernet, and we'll start with the charcuterie board." He looked at me, a smirk playing on his lips. "Don't worry, Natalie, we're willing to be the bigger people here. We know you've been emotional. Living in a vehicle does that to people." Linda chimed in, her voice dripping with that fake sympathy. "We're prepared to overlook the disruption you caused to the business accounts, sweetheart. Just give your father the new access codes, apologize to your sister for the stress you caused her, and you can come home. The garage is still available." Melissa didn't speak. She just glared at me, checking her phone, probably waiting for the notification that her client payment had finally cleared so she could pay off the coat.
I didn't say a word. I just watched them order. They accumulated $480 in appetizers alone. They were eating on credit, banking on a bailout that didn't exist. When the waiter finally cleared the plates, Thomas leaned back, picking his teeth. "All right," he said, "let's have it. What's this proposal? And make it quick. Melissa has client consultations tomorrow." I took a sip of my water. I set the glass down. "My proposal," I said, my voice soft, level, and devoid of any warmth, "is a timeline." I slid the leather portfolio across the table. Thomas frowned. He opened it. The first page wasn't an apology. It was the notice of default and acceleration demand. It was the legal document notifying him that Alpine Peak Investments, my trust, was calling the loan due immediately. "What is this?" Thomas laughed, a nervous barking sound. "Alpine Peak? My mortgage is with the bank. This is some kind of scam." "Turn the page," I said. He flipped it. The second document was the forensic audit report. It showed the wire transfer of $31,800 from my grandmother's custodial account to the Chen family trust. It was highlighted in yellow. Linda gasped. Her hand flew to her mouth. She recognized the account number. "And the next one," I said. Thomas turned the page. His face went from red to a terrifying shade of gray. It was my 2024 tax return. The line for adjusted gross income was circled in red ink. $21,847,000. The silence that fell over the table was absolute. It was the sound of oxygen leaving a room. The hum of the restaurant seemed to vanish. Melissa leaned over to look at the number, her eyes widening until I thought they might break. You, Thomas stammered. "This is fake." "It's filed with the IRS," I said, "unlike your business expenses." I leaned forward. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't need to. "For 3 weeks, you've been accusing me of hacking your accounts. You told everyone I sabotaged your livelihood. You're wrong." I pointed a manicured finger at the portfolio. "I didn't hack your accounts, Dad. I was your account. Every mortgage payment, every lease payment for Melissa's car, every fortunate consulting fee, that was me. That was my charity keeping you afloat, because you are incapable of generating actual wealth." I looked at Linda. She was trembling. "And you?" I said. You stole my inheritance to cover up Melissa's fraud. That's a felony, Mom. Grand larceny. I could send you to prison tonight with a single phone call." Linda started to cry. "Natalie, please, we're family." "No," I said, "we're not. Family doesn't steal. Parasites steal, and I just exterminated the infestation." I stood up. The movement was sharp, final. "You have 45 days to vacate the property. It belongs to Alpine Peak Investments now, which means it belongs to me. If you aren't out by the deadline, the sheriff will remove you." "Natalie!" Melissa shrieked, grabbing my arm. "You can't do this. I have a reputation in this city." I pulled my arm away as if she were contagious. "You don't have a reputation, Melissa. You have a tab, and I'm done paying it." I pulled a $100 bill from my purse and dropped it on the table next to my untouched water. "That covers my water and the tip," I said. I looked at the three of them one last time: the charcuterie board, the expensive wine, the crushing debt, the lies. They looked small. They looked like strangers. "Enjoy the dinner. You're paying for this one." I walked out of the restaurant and into the cold night air. I didn't look back. I didn't need to see them panic when the bill arrived. I already knew exactly what bankruptcy looked like. The fallout didn't happen all at once. It was a slow, grinding collapse, like a glacier calving into the sea. Melissa filed for Chapter 7 bankruptcy 4 weeks later. She tried to keep it quiet, but in a city like Denver, bankruptcy is as public as a billboard. The Mercedes was repossessed from the driveway of the house she was squatting in. The luxury interior designer was suddenly driving a 12-year-old Toyota and working reception at a design firm. My parents moved into a 2-bedroom rental apartment on the edge of town. It wasn't a bad place, really. It was perfectly adequate. But for people who had built their entire identity on appearing wealthy, adequate was a fate worse than death. I didn't stick around to watch. I didn't drive by to gloat. I bought a mountain property deep in the Rockies, 100 acres of pine trees and untouched snow, accessible only by a private road that I kept maintained. I installed a dedicated fiber optic line, built a server room in the basement, and set up my desk facing the mountain peaks. It's quiet here, the kind of quiet that resonates in your ears. My phone still lights up sometimes with blocked voicemails. I don't listen to them. I don't need to know if they're angry or sorry or begging. A lot of people ask me why I didn't try to fix them. Why, after I had won, didn't I use my money to force them into therapy or pay off their debts on the condition that they treat me better? It comes down to a concept I call the void of validation. See, I realized that you cannot fill a container that refuses to be emptied. My parents were committed to misunderstanding me. Their entire worldview required me to be the failure so that they could feel successful. If I had bailed them out, even with conditions, I would have just been validating their delusion. I would have been proving that I was still seeking their approval. The only way to win was to remove myself completely, to create a void where my presence used to be. When you stop arguing, stop explaining, and stop paying, you force people to sit in the silence of their own choices. That silence is louder than any scream. That absence is heavier than any presence. My revenge wasn't the foreclosure. It wasn't the dinner bill. My revenge is this view. I looked out the window. The snow was falling again, thick and heavy, blanketing the world in white. It covered the tracks, the roads, the noise. It erased everything until there was nothing left but the clean, sharp lines of the mountains. I turned back to my monitors. The trading algorithms were running smoothly, green numbers cascading down the black screens like digital rain. I didn't feel happy. Happiness is fleeting. I felt clean. If you're still listening, I want you to hear this. Stop arguing with people who are committed to misunderstanding you. Stop trying to buy respect from people who only value your utility. Take your energy, take your skills, and go build your own empire in the silence.
Let them laugh at your computer activities. Let them underestimate you. Because the quietest person in the room is usually the one holding the keys to everything.